I still remember the crisp February morning when I first set foot in Crystal Pines, a gated suburban community known for its tree-lined boulevards and meticulously manicured lawns. My name is Grant Whitaker, and after years of traveling the world as a drone technology entrepreneur, developing hardware and software for emergency response drones, I decided it was time to slow down and set roots somewhere calm. Crystal Pines seemed perfect. It was secure, dotted with pine trees that looked majestic under the winter sun, and boasted close proximity to the city without being in the thick of it. The homes were large but not ostentatious, each one sporting a 2- or 3-car garage and a neatly trimmed lawn. A glistening pond sat near the entrance, reflecting the sky so perfectly that on a clear day it looked like a piece of the heavens was embedded in the earth. On move-in day, I felt a surge of excitement and relief. My new house was a single-story craftsman-style home with a wide front porch, perfect for morning coffee, plus a roomy backyard where I could test some of my smaller drone prototypes. My golden retriever, Penny, bounded around the empty living room, nails clicking across the hardwood floors. It wasn't until late afternoon that the first representative of the Crystal Pines Homeowners Association showed up at my door. She had a folder in one hand and a self-satisfied smirk. She introduced herself as Marlene Farnham, but everyone else, so I'd soon learn, referred to her as Karen. Short hair teased into a sculpted bouffant, pastel sweater set, posture as stiff as a board, eyes scanning my property like she was evaluating a crime scene. "Welcome to Crystal Pines," she said in a sweet but condescending tone, handing over a chunky binder. "This contains our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Everything you need to maintain our community standards." I thanked her, flipping through the binder. Pages upon pages of rules about mailbox colors, acceptable grass height, regulations regarding decorations. The typical HOA approach, although more detailed than usual. I glanced at the large tab labeled Drone Restrictions and briefly wondered what it included. She must have followed my gaze because she cleared her throat and gestured pointedly. "We do have very strict guidelines about aerial devices," Karen announced. "We want to preserve the quiet and safety of our neighborhood." I answered with a polite smile. "I appreciate the need for quiet. I do happen to work in drone technology." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Drone technology, you say? Well, be sure to review those rules. We can't have random flying gizmos disturbing the peace or harming property values." I swallowed a snappy comeback, deciding to keep the conversation civil. "Of course. I'll make sure everything I do complies with local regulations." She gave me a curt nod and disappeared down the walkway. As she left, I couldn't shake the sensation that this was a person who thrived on controlling others. Little did I know how far her meddling would go, and how directly it would collide with my work in life-saving drone deliveries. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in the rhythms of Crystal Pines. Mornings began with Penny trotting alongside me for a quick jog around the block, the tall pines swaying in the breeze above us. Evenings ended with me tinkering in my garage workshop, organizing code modules on my laptop, fine-tuning battery systems, and testing small-scale prototypes for silent drone motors. Although the local HOA regulations frowned upon unapproved aerial activity, I figured that as long as I tested indoors or in my fenced backyard, it shouldn't cause any trouble. Most neighbors I met were friendly enough, albeit a bit reserved. They'd wave from their driveways, ask a few polite questions about my line of work, then remark, "Better keep those drones quiet. Karen won't like it." Or, "Watch out for Ms. Farnham. She enforces the rules like a drill sergeant." People tended to speak in lowered voices whenever they mentioned her, as though she might materialize at any moment if her name was uttered too loudly. Despite these cautionary tales, I was feeling optimistic. Having traveled extensively, I was accustomed to forging new friendships. Some folks recognized my name from articles about medical drone deliveries, especially in remote regions lacking quick access to ambulances or hospitals. My company, Skylift Innovations, had partnered with philanthropic groups to supply drones capable of delivering blood bags, defibrillators, and critical medications in emergency scenarios. It was a point of pride for me, seeing how drone technology could save lives. Early one Saturday, I decided to finalize a proof-of-concept test using a small medical supply drone right in my backyard. It was the size of a large pizza box, with 4 quiet rotors and a specialized payload compartment. My idea was to practice a short hover test to confirm it wouldn't exceed the neighborhood's typical ambient noise level. A couple minutes would suffice. I performed pre-flight checks. Battery full. Propellers clear. GPS locked. As soon as I armed the motors, they emitted a gentle hum, soft enough that, from the street, it wouldn't be noticeable. I eased the drone off the ground. It hovered at chest height, stable. Perfect. I let out a small cheer, excited that the device was so quiet. Suddenly, an authoritative voice barked from beyond my fence. "Excuse me. What are you doing?" I nearly lost control of the drone. Gently lowering it, I turned and recognized Karen's silhouette. She must have peered over the fence from a slight rise in the sidewalk. Her expression was a mix of triumph and outrage, as if she'd caught me burying toxic waste. "This is private property," I said calmly. "I'm doing a short test flight for a prototype." She scoffed. "That's a direct violation of the noise and aerial regulations. I'll have to write this up." My jaw tightened. "The noise is minimal. I'd be shocked if you can hear it past the fence. I've read the HOA guidelines. A short test flight in my own backyard is hardly a disruption." Her eyes flashed. "We'll see about that." Moments later, she was gone. My initial sense of foreboding returned full force. From that day on, I knew Karen had me in her crosshairs, and I had no inkling how far she'd go to hamper my work, or the medical drone deliveries that would soon become essential to our neighborhood's safety. One evening, about a month after I'd settled in, a frantic call pierced the quiet of my living room. My neighbor across the street, Barbara Jensen, was in a state of near panic. "Grant, please, my husband Frank's collapsed. He might be having a heart attack. The paramedics are on their way, but traffic is bad. Is there anything you can do?" I felt my pulse spike. I had no official authority as a medic, but I was well versed in emergency protocols from years of working with medical drones. "I'll come right over," I told her, grabbing Penny's leash and my phone. By the time I sprinted to her house, I saw Barbara kneeling beside Frank, who was conscious but in obvious distress, clutching his chest. The ambulance was still miles away. Barbara's eyes were wild with fear. I knelt down, checked Frank's breathing and pulse, told Barbara to keep him calm. Then I remembered. In my garage, I had a prototype drone with an AED, automated external defibrillator, kit. It was originally for demonstration, but fully functional. If Frank's condition worsened, that AED might be critical. Without hesitation, I dashed back home, rummaged through the workshop. The drone sat inside a weatherproof case, with the AED kit clipped in place. Normally, I'd have tested it thoroughly, but time was short. I double-checked the battery levels. Good enough. I latched it in, carried the drone under my arm, and ran out. In front of Barbara's house, I readied the drone for takeoff. The plan was simple: fly it over to them, a short flight, basically from one side of the street to the other. Not exactly a heroic distance, but it was infinitely faster than rummaging through my car or running on foot. The entire function of these drones was to expedite life-saving equipment. I launched the drone, guiding it across the street. It hovered near Barbara's driveway, only 6 feet in the air. The hum was so low it barely cut through the nighttime breeze. I landed it gently. Barbara, tears in her eyes, grabbed the AED kit. She placed it beside Frank, who was still conscious but clammy with sweat. We readied the device, just in case. Moments later, the paramedics finally arrived. They commended the presence of the AED, though they managed to stabilize Frank without needing to defibrillate him. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Barbara gripped my hand, thanking me profusely. The medics told me, it was good thinking. If his condition had taken a worse turn, having an AED at hand can be life or death. Standing there under the streetlights, heart pounding, I realized how crucial drone-delivered medical supplies could be, even in a seemingly safe, suburban environment. The ambulance had been delayed by a multi-car collision on the main road. My quick reaction, plus drone technology, had effectively bridged the gap. I felt gratitude well up inside me, but also a pang of worry about how Karen or the HOA might react to hearing about a drone flight in the neighborhood. Sure enough, before dawn even broke, I discovered exactly how Karen would respond. The morning after Frank's emergency, I stepped out onto my porch, bleary-eyed from a restless night. My phone pinged with multiple notifications from the Crystal Pines HOA forum, an online portal where residents posted news, lost and found, and official announcements. I tapped the newest post, which bore the subject line. Notice, effective immediately, ban on all drone operations in Crystal Pines. My eyes widened as I read the text. By order of the Crystal Pines HOA president, Ms. Marlene Farnham, any and all drone usage, whether recreational, commercial, or for alleged medical reasons, is strictly prohibited within community boundaries. These devices present a noise nuisance, safety hazard, and potential invasion of privacy. Violators are subject to fines, property liens, and legal action. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Could she even do that? A total ban, enacted overnight, without discussion or a vote. It reeked of an abuse of HOA power. And the phrasing, alleged medical reasons, felt like a direct shot at me, effectively discounting the near-heart attack rescue from the night before. I wasn't the only one outraged. The forum's comment section was on fire with protest. Karen can't just ban drones that save lives. My daughter uses a specialized drone to map out her college research project. This is insane. Isn't this a matter for the FAA, not some local HOA? Yet a small clique, presumably Karen's closest allies, cheered her on. One user wrote, "Finally, no more buzzing machines. Great job, Ms. Farnham." Another chimed in, "This is private property, so we can enforce whatever we want to protect our lifestyle." I felt a knot of anger coil in my stomach. I'd encountered overbearing HOAs before, but none that unilaterally forbid something as beneficial and regulated as drone usage, let alone medical drone deliveries. The post gave no mention of an appeals process, no mention of exceptions. It was an outright ban. As I read on, an all-too-familiar dread sank in. Karen had effectively painted me, someone who had just tried to help a neighbor in a medical crisis, as a dangerous nuisance. And from the looks of it, she had the backing of enough board members to push this ban through. I knew it wouldn't stand legally or ethically, but how much damage would be done in the meantime? That same day, I received a flurry of texts from neighbors who shared my indignation. Barbara Jensen was livid. She posted a heartfelt message on the forum, detailing how the drone-delivered AED had been a potential lifesaver for her husband Frank. She urged the HOA to reconsider. What if there's a child in crisis next time? Are we supposed to accept that we have no right to expedited medical help because of noise concerns? Karen's condescending response dripped with arrogance. While we sympathize with your family's situation, we must uphold the best interests of the majority of residents who did not consent to having drones fly overhead. The ban is for the greater good. The next day, a group of neighbors decided to hold a town hall-style gathering in the clubhouse, trying to force the board to address these concerns. I went, hoping logic would prevail. The small, stuffy meeting room filled with nearly 30 residents, some outraged, others merely curious. At the front sat Karen, flanked by two other board members. She wore that same pastel sweater set, a smug tilt to her chin. The conversation began cordially enough, but devolved into a heated debate. Barbara Jensen spoke first, recounting how the medical drone had arrived before paramedics, giving them an AED just in case. "We should be celebrating this technology, not banning it," she said, voice trembling with emotion. Another neighbor, a parent of a diabetic teenager, pointed out, "My daughter occasionally needs emergency insulin. If a specialized drone could deliver it faster, it might save her life. Why remove that possibility?" Karen responded dismissively. Neighbors do not want random robotic devices buzzing near their rooftops. There have been complaints about noise, not to mention privacy risks. Who's to say these drones aren't filming us? She then brandished a printed sheet, presumably a stack of anonymous complaints, waving it in the air like evidence. It didn't matter how many times people reasoned that modern medical drones have strict payload compartments, rarely carry cameras, and operate under federal guidelines. Karen talked over them, insisting it was the HOA's right to keep the skies above Crystal Pines drone-free. As tensions climbed, I cleared my throat and introduced myself formally. "I'm Grant Whitaker, founder of Skylift Innovations. We've deployed medical drone programs worldwide, partnering with nonprofits and even governments. Drones can deliver urgent medication, AEDs, EpiPens." Karen interrupted, her voice cracking with anger. "We do not need lectures from some profiteer trying to turn our neighborhood into a testing ground." A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. I kept my composure. "Ms. Farnham, I'm no profiteer. My technology has saved countless lives. If you allow me 5 minutes, I can explain exactly how we mitigate noise and privacy issues. You might find that. She cut me off again. No, I will not indulge these fantasies about drone utopias. This discussion is over. The ban stands. And with that, she declared the meeting adjourned, ignoring the shouts of protest from the audience. It was a brazen display of power, as though she believed her will was law. I saw people shaking their heads in disbelief. There was no question, this was going to escalate. In the days following that disastrous town hall, the rift in Crystal Pines widened. Two distinct camps emerged. Karen's supporters, a small but vocal group who detested any form of aerial device, particularly in their neighborhood. They championed the notion that drones spelled chaos, intrusive, noisy, prone to malfunction. The outraged majority, homeowners and families who recognized drones' potential benefits or at least felt the ban was draconian and poorly considered. Many recognized me from news articles or online videos, expressing shock that Karen would stifle something so beneficial. On social media and local news sites, the ban became a talking point. A small local news station briefly covered the dispute, labeling it drone controversy in high-end suburb. They interviewed Barbara, who explained how an AD delivery drone might have saved her husband had his condition deteriorated. The news anchor asked Karen for comment, but she refused, dismissing the matter as private HOA policy. Meanwhile, tension rose between me and the HOA board. I received a series of official letters, each signed by Karen. One threatened fines if I attempted another drone flight, no matter the reason. Another scolded me for unauthorized use of an aerial device. A third insisted I remove all references to drone technology from my front yard. Although all I had was a small sign reading "Protected by Skylift Innovation Security Drone," a tongue-in-cheek sign I'd put up as a conversation starter. It seemed Karen's goal was to bury me under a mountain of petty citations, hoping I'd fold. But little did she know, I wasn't just an engineer tinkering in a garage. Skylift Innovations had a robust legal team, and I had personal connections to organizations that specialized in defending emerging technologies. Beyond that, I was no stranger to bureaucratic fights. I had navigated countless regulatory obstacles worldwide. One afternoon, after receiving yet another threatening letter in my mailbox, I placed a call to my personal attorney, Bethany Price, who had helped me secure drone usage permits in multiple cities. When I described the situation, she nearly laughed in disbelief. An HOA can't override federal FAA regulations, Bethany pointed out. They can't forbid something that's legally permitted by higher jurisdiction, especially for medical or emergency use. This woman is out of her depth. I exhaled in relief. That's what I suspected. But we need to handle this carefully. It's not just about me flying a hobby drone. I want to keep the door open for life-saving deliveries. People in this community might rely on it. Bethany's voice steadied. We have a strong legal position. I'll start drafting a cease and desist letter regarding their blanket ban. We'll request a formal negotiation. If they refuse, we'll escalate. The thought of legal battles made me uneasy, but if it meant ensuring that an ailing neighbor could get quick medical relief, I was willing to fight. Though the stakes were about to rise higher than I expected, and not just in the courtroom. A few weeks later, the unthinkable happened. Another medical crisis struck Crystal Pines. This time, it was a severe allergic reaction. A boy named Ethan, just 13, accidentally ate a cookie containing peanuts at a neighborhood bake sale. The poor kid's throat started swelling rapidly, and his frantic mother dialed 911, only to be told that the nearest ambulance was busy responding to a collision. It might take precious minutes, maybe too many, to get to him. Word reached me through frantic phone calls from neighbors. Ethan's in trouble. He needs an EpiPen ASAP. People knew about my drone technology. If I still had an EpiPen kit on one of my prototypes, we could deliver it swiftly. But in the back of my mind, I remembered Karen's unyielding ban. According to her edicts, launching a drone, even for a medical emergency, was subject to fines and possibly worse. Any hesitation vanished when I heard the panic in Ethan's mother's voice. She had one EpiPen, but was worried it wasn't enough if his condition worsened. I mentally reviewed my inventory. I had a standard EpiPen kit, stored in a climate-controlled container for demonstration purposes. The drone was fully charged. Speed was of the essence. I grabbed my phone, alerted a neighbor who was with Ethan to wait outside for the drone, and rushed to my backyard workshop. With trembling hands, I loaded the EpiPen kit. My software automatically plotted the short route, about 4 blocks away. I pressed the launch button. The motor spun up quietly. Then the drone rose into the air, soared over my fence, and vanished behind the rooftops of Crystal Pines, heading to the designated waypoint. After less than 2 minutes, my screen showed the drone's arrival. A live text from the neighbor read, "We got it. Thank you." Relief coursed through me. I hoped the ambulance would arrive soon, but at least they had an extra EpiPen on site if Ethan's reaction worsened. Not 30 seconds later, my phone rang with a familiar, furious voice. "Karen." I let it go to voicemail, my heart too full of concern for Ethan to deal with her. Then came text messages, each more threatening than the last. "Karen, HOA, you are defying the drone ban. Cease flight operations immediately or face legal consequences." "Karen, HOA, this is your final warning, Mr. Whitaker. The board is convening to revoke your residency, if necessary." I stared at the messages, a righteous anger rising within me. The boy's life was at stake, and this woman was ranting about her ban. Didn't she understand how vital these medical deliveries could be? Thankfully, the paramedics reached Ethan soon after. The boy recovered, crisis averted. But word spread like wildfire that once again, a drone from my workshop had potentially saved someone's life, and that Karen had threatened me throughout the ordeal. Public opinion quickly turned even more sharply against her. However, she refused to back down. Within days of Ethan's close call, Karen launched a new wave of intimidation tactics. First, she slapped me with a formal HOA violation notice. The letter cited multiple infractions of the no drone resolution, threatened daily fines of $500, and even mentioned the possibility of placing a lien on my property if I didn't comply. I was astounded at the length she'd go. Her justification for the daily fines was that I was operating a commercial drone business out of a residential address. Never mind that I'd only used the technology for emergencies and, in one instance, a backyard test. She conveniently overlooked that the deliveries were purely humanitarian, with no money changing hands. The entire premise was contrived. It didn't stop there. The HOA's official website was updated with a bold, blinking banner. Drone ban enforcement. Residents are urged to report any unauthorized aerial activity to the HOA hotlines. Offenders will be punished to the fullest extent of HOA policy. Neighbors began complaining that Karen, or one of her cronies, was patrolling the streets in her SUV, scanning the skies. Several folks recounted seeing her aiming binoculars at rooftops, presumably to catch any glimpse of a drone. She even forced one homeowner to remove an old decorative weather vane because it resembled a drone from a distance. It was madness. Yet, ironically, as Karen's clampdown intensified, so did the solidarity among neighbors who opposed her. Dozens of them reached out to me, offering moral support. Some offered financial help if I faced fines. Another group proposed a formal petition to recall Karen from her HOA presidency. People were fed up. Meanwhile, my attorney, Bethany, stepped up our legal strategy. She filed for an injunction against the HOA, arguing that Karen's unilateral ban was both unreasonable and superseded by federal regulations. The hearing was set for a couple of weeks out. But in the interim, Karen still reigned supreme, harassing me daily, bragging online that no court could dictate how we run our private community. Tensions soared to new heights, overshadowing the quiet suburban atmosphere. And ironically, all this turmoil led to an even bigger spotlight on my identity. The local press discovered that I wasn't just some drone hobbyist, but rather a globally known entrepreneur whose technology had garnered accolades. That publicity would soon escalate into a national spectacle, one that Karen never saw coming. Not long after the second emergency, a regional TV news crew appeared at Crystal Pines Gate, wanting to interview me about the drone ban. They'd caught wind of how 2 neighbors' lives were possibly saved by emergency drone deliveries, and how the HOA had responded by threatening more than ever. I was hesitant to add fuel to the fire, but also believed in transparency about the technology's benefits. The day they arrived, they set up cameras on the sidewalk outside my home. The HOA's private property boundary ended at the curb. A reporter named Layla Summers introduced herself. "We're here to clarify the story," she said. "The public is outraged that medical help might be restricted. Is this ban even enforceable?" I shared my side. The rationale behind medical drone deliveries, the rapid response times, the proven track record in rural areas, and now even suburban ones. When she asked about Karen, I tried to remain diplomatic. I believe Ms. Farnham is misguided. She's concerned about noise and privacy, but these modern drones are designed to minimize disruption. We offered to discuss these concerns, but the HOA declined. As the interview progressed, a few curious neighbors gathered. Some shouted supportive comments. "We love your drones, Grant." Another neighbor yelled, "Down with the ban." Some were filming with their phones. A sense of camaraderie was in the air. Suddenly, Karen's silver SUV screeched into view, parking crookedly at the curb. She jumped out, a phone in her hand, red-faced. "This is trespassing," she snapped. "You're not allowed to film on HOA property without permission." Layla Summers calmly responded, "We're on the public sidewalk, ma'am. We have every legal right to report the news. Would you like to comment?" Karen pointed an accusing finger at me. "He's violating community standards, running an illegal drone operation. He's a menace to our peaceful way of life." The camera zoomed in on her. Layla asked, "Ma'am, can you explain why you consider urgent medical deliveries a menace?" Karen sputtered, "Because it's disruptive, invasive, and we never asked for it. People in this neighborhood are distressed by the possibility of being spied on, or having these contraptions whirring overhead at all hours." Layla's eyebrows rose. "And you have evidence of spying? Of flights at all hours?" "No, but it could happen." Karen fumbled, clearly unprepared. The exchange was broadcast later that night, painting Karen in a harsh light. Social media exploded with debates about HOAs overstepping boundaries, the value of medical drone deliveries, and the tension between technology and privacy. More national outlets picked up the story, especially after learning about my background. Headlines read, "Local HOA blocks life-saving drones from tech innovator," and "Medical drone ban sparks outrage in suburb." Meanwhile, Karen continued doubling down in online posts. She insisted she was protecting the community from an onslaught of drones. But the more she fought, the more the public rallied behind me, and the more she exposed her own tyranny. Within days, the story went viral. Twitter hashtags soared, YouTube commentators posted reaction videos, and major tech blogs ran articles about the drone ban fiasco. Overnight, I found myself inundated with support from all corners of the globe. People with medical conditions, paramedics, and technology enthusiasts bombarded my inbox with messages of solidarity. They shared experiences where drones had rescued hikers, delivered essential medicines to rural clinics, and performed time-critical interventions. The consensus was clear. Karen's stance was not just petty, it was potentially dangerous. One particular reaction video, with over 1 million views, compiled footage of Karen's meltdown at the news segment. The content creator dubbed her the drone-fearing Karen, and the nickname stuck. Memes of her raging face circulated widely, spliced with images of drones dropping cartoonish aid packages. People mocked her for blocking medical assistance in the name of quiet lifestyles. All this attention inevitably brought scrutiny to Crystal Pines. Other residents, previously fearful of publicly criticizing Karen, began speaking up. They recounted her history of intimidation, from distributing fines over slightly tall grass to forcing a neighbor to repaint a fence 3 times. A small protest formed near the main entrance, with a group of activists holding signs that read, "Drones save lives," and "No more HOA tyranny." Karen's reaction was predictable. She declared the protest trespassing and tried to have them removed. But the sidewalk in front of the gate was public property, and the protesters stood their ground. She posted a lengthy rant on the HOA forum, describing the activists as outsiders stirring up chaos. Yet, ironically, it was her own heavy-handed policies that had brought them to the community's doorstep. Inside Crystal Pines, many residents felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. Embarrassment that their HOA president was making them a national spectacle, and relief that her reign of terror might finally be challenged. A recall petition began circulating. Within hours, it gathered enough signatures to force an emergency board meeting. Across social media, the fervor only grew. People from around the world started championing the idea that neighborhoods should not be able to ban medical drones when lives might be at stake. Pressures built. And still, a critical court hearing awaited us. a chance to legally invalidate Karen's ban once and for all. At last, the day of our injunction hearing arrived, a crisp morning under a bright blue sky. The county courthouse was buzzing with reporters and curious onlookers. Inside, the hearing was set in a medium-sized chamber lined with wooden benches. On one side, me and my attorney, Bethany Price. On the other, Karen and the HOA's legal counsel, a stern man named Mr. Atwood. The judge, an older woman named Judge Caldwell, entered. After preliminary statements, Bethany confidently laid out our arguments. Federal preemption. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, regulates national airspace. An HOA can't supersede federal authority to ban all drone operations, especially not emergency services. Unreasonableness. The ban didn't undergo standard HOA voting procedures. It was an arbitrary, unilateral decision by the HOA president. Public interest. Medical deliveries had clearly been beneficial. 2 local residents had borderline life-threatening incidents that were mitigated by drone assistance. When it was the defense's turn, Mr. Atwood trotted out concerns about noise, privacy, and property rights. He tried to depict me as a renegade drone operator, ignoring local rules to test prototypes in a quiet suburb. Then Karen was called to testify. She approached the stand confidently at first, but as Bethany questioned her, cracks in her composure appeared. Bethany, Ms. Farnham, can you explain the process by which the ban was passed? Was there a full board vote? Karen, well, the board is aware of it. I informed them by email. We have the authority to make emergency resolutions if we believe the community is threatened. Bethany, so you made a unilateral decision? Karen, hesitating, well, in practice, yes, but it's within my rights as president under certain emergency provisions. Bethany, coolly, was there an actual emergency? Or do you classify a neighbor's life-saving drone flight as an emergency to ban the technology entirely? Karen sputtered. The threat was, these flying contraptions disrupt our peaceful environment. That is an emergency to many residents. An incredulous murmur spread through the courtroom. Bethany continued, highlighting the times drones had delivered critical medical aid. She asked Karen directly if she acknowledged these had potentially saved lives. Karen dodged, insisting it was not verified or could have been done another way. The judge's expression grew stonier by the minute. Finally, the defense ended. The judge requested a brief recess. We all waited anxiously. Outside the courthouse, a throng of supporters cheered me on. In the hallway, I glimpsed Karen. She looked uneasy, yet still defiant, posture rigid as steel. When Judge Caldwell reconvened, she wasted no time delivering her ruling. The ban was unenforceable under FAA regulations, which allowed drone operations that comply with federal laws. The HOA had failed to follow its own bylaws. No proper vote, no majority consensus. There was a compelling public interest in allowing emergency drone deliveries, given they had already benefited the community. In short, the ban was struck down. Applause broke out among observers. Karen's lips pressed, so tight they turned white. The judge ended with a pointed admonition that the HOA consider reasoned guidelines in the future, but it could not impose a blanket prohibition on drone use, especially for medical emergencies. It was a major victory for common sense, and it marked the beginning of Karen's downfall. With the court ruling in my favor, the residents of Crystal Pines found new courage to stand against Karen's tyranny. The day after the hearing, my mailbox was stuffed with handwritten letters from neighbors expressing gratitude and relief. Some even included homemade cookies or gift baskets, welcoming me properly to the community. Moreover, the recall petition that had been quietly circulating now gained unstoppable momentum. Enough signatures were gathered to call for an emergency election to remove Karen as HOA president and replace her with someone more balanced. The board could no longer ignore it. They had to schedule a special meeting. In the days leading up to the vote, Karen tried every trick in the book. Fear-mongering flyers. She posted flyers around the neighborhood, claiming drones would lead to sky congestion, dangerous crashes, and constant surveillance. Most people saw through the exaggerations. Personal attacks. She publicly questioned my motives, painting me as a technocrat. I found it ironic, given my track record of philanthropic partnerships, threats, and fines. Despite the court order, she threatened to fine homeowners who expressed support for the recall, citing vague rules about community slander. But such threats held no legal weight. On the night of the emergency election, the community clubhouse overflowed. Residents stood shoulder to shoulder, anxious to cast their votes. The tension was palpable. Karen, seated at a table near the front, scowled at anyone who met her eye. Beside her sat the other board members, looking equally uneasy. When the ballots were counted, the result was unequivocal. Nearly 85% of the homeowners voted to recall Karen. Gasps and applause filled the room. She bolted upright, face red with fury. "You're making a grave mistake," she declared. But the cheers of relief drowned her out. People had had enough of her authoritarian rule. In a matter of weeks, a new president, Sandra Milligan, a retired teacher known for her fair-mindedness, would step in, vowing to follow the proper processes for any regulations. The nightmare was over, or so we thought. Karen's hubris, however, would drive her to more desperate measures, leading to her ultimate punishment. Despite losing her position, Karen refused to relinquish power quietly. She still owned a house in Crystal Pines and had devoted followers, though their number had dwindled. Rumors flew that she was conspiring with a few radical supporters to sabotage the newly proposed drone-friendly guidelines. Tensions escalated when I discovered that, late at night, someone had broken into my backyard workshop. They damaged my charging stations, slashed wires, and spray-painted NO drones across my tool chest. My security cameras captured fleeting images of two masked figures, one female, tall, matching Karen's build. The next morning, I filed a police report. As the investigation began, more vandalism incidents surfaced. A neighbor, who had publicly supported me, found her car tires slashed. Another neighbor, known for being vocal against Karen, reported weird phone calls telling him to stop meddling. All signs pointed to Karen's circle, though I couldn't prove it outright. The real turning point came when, in a brazen act, the local post office flagged suspicious mail delivered to the new HOA president, Sandra Milligan. Inside an unmarked envelope, authorities found a threatening note referencing harm if she continued supporting drone usage. Fingerprinting led investigators directly to Karen's house. A search warrant soon followed. Police uncovered not only evidence linking her to the threatening note, but also items matching the break-in at my workshop. Overnight, the narrative shifted from an overzealous HOA official to a criminal suspect. Karen was arrested and charged with vandalism, harassment, and making terroristic threats. Handcuffed, she was escorted from her home while stunned neighbors looked on. The same local news cameras that once filmed her rants captured her, pale-faced, entering the back of a squad car. Karen's day in court arrived swiftly. The charges were serious, bolstered by tangible evidence. The threatening letters, fingerprints, security footage from my backyard, and testimony from accomplices who, facing their own charges, implicated her in the planning. The trial was short, overshadowed by the overwhelming proof of her culpability. I testified about the property damage. Sandra Milligan recounted the intimidation. Other residents described Karen's legacy of harassment. The jury took little time to convict. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on multiple felony counts, Karen's shoulders sagged. She tried to argue that she had been unfairly targeted, but no one believed her, not after the avalanche of incriminating facts. At sentencing, the judge pulled no punches. Prison time. Karen was sentenced to several years for her orchestrated campaign of vandalism and threats. Restitution. She was ordered to pay for the damages, including the cost of my slashed equipment, the neighbor's tires, and other vandalized property. Property confiscation. Because the fines and restitution soared into the tens of thousands, the court allowed a lien on Karen's house. Facing insurmountable debt, she was forced to forfeit it. The property would be sold, with proceeds going toward the victim's compensation. The once mighty president of the Crystal Pines HOA stood in shackles, facing the end of her reign, her illusions of grandeur shattered. As she was led away, it struck me how her arrogance and refusal to compromise had ultimately destroyed everything she once controlled. A hush fell over the courtroom as the door closed behind her. With Karen gone, Crystal Pines found renewed harmony. The new HOA board, led by Sandra Milligan, promptly rescinded all vestiges of the drone ban. They collaborated with Skylift Innovations to establish clear, balanced guidelines for drone usage. ensuring that everyday flights would respect privacy and noise limits, while emergency medical deliveries had priority clearance. The community also organized workshops, educating homeowners about how drones could serve as helpful tools rather than nuisances. Barbara Jensen's husband, Frank, made a full recovery, grateful for the quick response months prior. Young Ethan also bounced back, occasionally joking that a drone had saved him from the world's worst cookie. Over time, residents felt a deep appreciation for the technology that had come to their aid, not to mention an abiding sense of relief that one tyrant's attempts to stifle innovation had failed. Out in the broader world, the story of HOA Karen versus medical drones faded from national headlines, but not before sparking important conversations about balancing new technology with legitimate neighborhood concerns. Many communities began looking into ways to integrate medical drone deliveries, seeing how crucial they could be during emergencies when every second counted. And me? I still live in Crystal Pines, my days much quieter now, except for the soft hum of a drone occasionally lifting off for testing or an arranged demonstration. Penny the golden retriever happily lounges in the yard, unbothered by the gentle buzz overhead. With the gloom of Karen's regime behind us, the community has blossomed into a shining example of how technology and neighborhood life can coexist in harmony, so long as common sense and compassion guide the rules.